Welcome back, everybody. I said in the last video that I was going to look at some Cold War era weapons, weapon systems, things like that. I've gotten some recommendations on a couple of different things to do. I've gotten some recommendations on some different Japanese weapon systems to look at. But today we're going to do the J-35 Draken. I have no idea if that's actually how you pronounce it. I believe the word itself is dragon, isn't it? Dragon's something around dragon. So um, I'm just sort of guessing on pronunciation and making it kind of sound like dragon. But somebody will let me know if it's way off. But it's another weapon detective video. I really like the way that they set these up. I'm curious about the aircraft itself, so let's go ahead and jump into it. Remember, if you like the channel, want to support what we're doing, you can like, comment, subscribe, or join the Discord. I'll put the link down below.
The J-35 Draken is one of the unforgettable legends of the Swedish aviation industry. Although it never fought in real combat, with its gorgeous look and profoundly impressive capabilities, it is one of the most admired fighters for aviation enthusiasts. Now, we are investigating the J-35 Draken, the Swedish dragon of the skies. Please don't forget to subscribe to our channel before we start, and give us a thumbs up if you like our video. To be notified of our new video, please click the bell button. Also, you can now click the join button to support our channel. The J-35, also known as SAAB 35, was an exclusive combat aircraft in its time. It did not look like any other fighters, and it was more capable than many of them. This was a tremendous success when the aviation industries of many leading European countries began to decline. Before the Second World War, Germany and the UK had been producing the best fighters. But after the war, other players in Europe, like France and Sweden, began to claim this title. Because while Germany suffered great destruction, the UK was economically over. The priorities of these two countries were different. France and Sweden had fallen behind in the field of the aviation industry before the war. Now, they decided to invest more in this field. Develop
And you see a lot of different stuff happening post World War II. There are certain economies that are really struggling. Obviously, we've talked before about the U.S. Marshall Program, um, where the U.S. was basically just throwing cash into certain European economies to try to get them back off the ground again after World War II. So there are some countries that just don't really have it in them, aren't really in a great spot to be pushing forward military aviation. The ones that do aren't just the ones that have the economy, obviously, that could back it up, but also it tends to be countries. Now, France is a little bit on the outside of this, but sort of not. But for Sweden, they're close to an enemy, and an enemy that is coming onto the scene as a major potential issue in the coming era. And so you kind of have to make a move there. You're put kind of up against it. This is, the US has this big push in a lot of different military tech in this time because they're looking at the same potential enemy. The difference there being obviously geography. Sweden is a lot closer to the Soviets than the US is. But yeah, there's some countries, especially ones that were economically devastated by the end of World War II, their war is over. And so they're going in a totally different direction. Whereas you have other countries who they kind of view it like if there is going to be a war, it's just getting started. And so they're pushing this military tech forward.
developments in the late 1930s had paved the way for the new aviation industry strategy for Stockholm. Just before the Second World War, the Swedish Air Force had obsolete biplane fighters. So, Stockholm ordered the P-35s and P-66 Vanguards from USA designated as J9 and J10 in Sweden, respectively. Yet, after the 1940 German occupation of Norway, Washington imposed an arms embargo against any nation other than the UK. Before this embargo, Sweden had managed to receive some J9s, but none of the J10s had been delivered. So 60 RE-2000 Falco, designated as J-20 by the Swedish, was purchased. However, Swedish Air Force needed more amount of modern fighters. In 1942, Sweden decided to develop an indigenous fighter called J-22. Stockholm realized that an independent national aviation industry is essential to protect its neutrality and the country. After the Second World War, Sweden became one of the pioneers of the jet era. In 1947, the first Swedish jet fighter, SAAB 21R, made its maiden flight.
You saw from World War II, and then there are some regional conflicts after World War II, but from World War II specifically, airplanes really, really start to play a big role. And so, yeah, a lot of countries come to this realization that, like, oh, an aviation industry is actually a really big deal for national defense going forward. And the resources that have to be put towards it, that have to be funneled towards it in order to build it, are just going to have to be kind of written off, because it's going to be necessary to have this aviation industry in order to preserve national defense, and national sovereignty. That's kind of the way that countries looked at it. But yeah, airplanes are they play a huge role in World War II, and it kind of changes the way that warfare is looked at going into this next era.
It was a jet converted from the piston engine J-21. 1 year later, the J-29 Tunnan, which was the first Western European fighter to be produced with a swept wing after the Second World War, met the sky. The J-32 Lansen, which made its maiden flight in 1951, was the first Swedish-made jet aircraft equipped with radar. But the Swedish Air Force continued to acquire jet fighters such as the Vampires and Venoms from the UK. Meanwhile, in 1948, the Swedish Air Force requested for the development of a second-generation jet interceptor as the replacement of the J-22 Tunnan and J-28 Vampire day fighters, as well as J-32B Lansen night fighter. This was a great challenge for SAAB. Initially, Sweden decided to develop an aircraft with a top speed of Mach 1.4 to 1.5. But at that time, only the Bell X-1 research aircraft had a supersonic flight capability. Besides, rapidly improving aviation technologies made SAAB's job more difficult. The Swedish Air Force revised the top speed requirement to Mach 1.8 in 1956.
I've wondered about this a lot, about how difficult it would be to make or manufacture weapon systems in an era where technology is moving so quickly that you're really, really up against it, and it might be kind of difficult to get something out that isn't going to not necessarily be obsolete by the time it comes out, but won't be top of the line. And you spend all of this time and money and all these resources. You can't have something come out that's behind the curve as soon as it's brought out. And I've wondered a lot. That has to be extremely difficult, especially in the era, well, like this, where particularly aviation tech is being pushed so hard, and it's moving so quickly. It would just be hard to keep up with.
3 years later, now it was demanding a Mach 2 fighter. Also, Sweden was seeking a special aircraft which would answer the country's special conditions. Underpopulated Sweden was deploying its air squadrons far from population centers. Now, the new jet had to be operable from reinforced public roads used as a part of wartime air bases. This was also making the short takeoff and landing capability essential. So, the low altitude and low speed performance had to be superb. But also, the engineers of SAAB would not sacrifice the high altitude and high speed performance. The Air Force was demanding that a small ground support team, which consists of conscripts, should be able to refuel and rearm the aircraft in a short time. To answer these demands, the SAAB engineers focused on the delta wing design. But after a short time, they realized that to reach the desired performance with the delta wing, they had to lengthen the fuselage, which would make the aircraft extremely heavy. So, the SAAB engineers decided to focus on the double delta wing, which is also known as blended wing body. This was an unproven design before. So, they began to work on subscale test aircraft, the SAAB 210, to prove the double delta wing design. The result was highly satisfactory. Naturally, these efforts required time. To fulfill the gap, in 1954, Sweden ordered 120 Hawker Hunter, designated as J-34, from the UK. This was Sweden's last supply of jet combat aircraft from abroad. The era of the J-35 was about to begin. The first prototype of the Draken made its maiden flight on October 25, 1955. The first three prototypes were powered by Rolls-Royce A1 Mark 48A turbojets with afterburners. The first production aircraft, J-35A, met the sky for the first time on February 15, 1958. The Draken was introduced to the Swedish Air Force Service on March 8, 1960. The production variants had the RM6B turbojet engine, a license-built model of the Rolls-Royce A1 Mark 48A. The J-35 was the first combat aircraft with double delta wings. The sweepback on the center wing leading edge was 80 degrees, on the other wing's leading edge 57 degrees. This design improved agility. The Draken was the first combat jet which could conduct the Cobra maneuver. The Swedish named this maneuver Kochparad, meaning short parade. But this was not a planned capability and was also highly dangerous. So, the Swedish Air Force trained its pilots to avoid performing this maneuver. All
That's hilarious. It's not done on purpose. It's super dangerous. And then in the background, you see the plane immediately pulling back like that.
Also, the unstable design of double delta wings was a factor which made J-35 difficult to land, especially for early versions. The pilots had to manually stabilize the aircraft during landing. Other than that, the Draken met the Swedish Air Force's requirements in many areas perfectly. By using the afterburner, the aircraft could take off from a distance of 650 meters. It could land on a strip between 530 to 610 meters. The Draken was compatible with the Citril 60, which was the first example of digital network-centric warfare systems. The J-35 was an easy-to-operate aircraft. In 6 minutes, an 8-person crew could refuel and rearm the Draken. Yes, it was a high-altitude interceptor.
So is this where that starts? The idea of, is it here or is it before this? Is it not aircraft related? Are they just implementing it on an aircraft for the first time? But the idea of the system needs to be relatively simple, easy to, do repairs, refuel, needs to be able to be handled by conscripts. Is this where that idea starts, or is it before this and they're just implementing it with the new aircraft?
But also, its good quick-turn ability and high speed at all altitudes gave the aircraft with a good dogfight capability. It was the pride of the Swedish aviation industry. The Draken was the first true supersonic Western European combat aircraft to enter service. Also, the J-35 was the first Western European aircraft which reached twice the speed of sound. The wings and fuselage were all metal. The nose was made of fiberglass reinforced for radar. There was a retractable tail wheel under the rear fuselage, besides the standard tricycle landing gear. Austria, Denmark, Finland, and Sweden were the users of the Draken.
Whose red one was that? Was it a Danish one?
The last version of the aircraft, J-35J, had a length of 15.34 meters, a wingspan of 9.42 meters, and a height of 3.89 meters. Its wing area was 49.22 square meters. The empty weight of the aircraft was 7,422 kilograms, while its maximum takeoff weight was 12,430 kilograms. One 77.3 kilonewton Volvo RM6C afterburning turbofan engine provided a maximum speed of Mach 2. The aircraft had a ferry range of 3,250 kilometers. The Draken's combat radius was about 1,000 kilometers. It could climb an altitude of 20,000 meters, in other words, 66,000 feet. The aircraft had one 30mm Aiden gun and 9 hardpoints. The J-35J could carry the AIM-4 Falcon or AIM-9 Sidewinder missiles, as well as rocket pods and bombs.
Yeah, I looked up a lot of this stuff the other day in regards to the SR-71 video that I did with uh, the Swedish pilots that escorted the SR-71. So I had looked up some of the specs of the plane itself.
There were some differences between the variants of J-35. The A, B, and D variants had two 30mm guns, while the F and J variants had only one. The other models of Draken had no gun. The SK-35 and the early production variant of the J-35A had a length of 15.21 meters. The maximum takeoff weight of the models constantly increased. The first production variant of the Draken was the J-35A, whose nickname was Adam. The designation of the first 40 of them was J-35A1 or Adam Kort, meaning Adam Short. They had no radar or gun sight. These systems were fitted on these aircraft later. The J-35A2 or Adam Long, meaning Adam Long, was the later version. They had a new afterburner, so their tail section was lengthened, which also unexpectedly reduced drag. They were also equipped with the PS-02A radar. The early version of the J-35B, whose nickname was Bertel, was a day fighter and had no radar. These aircraft were equipped with the Euro gun sights taken from the scrap J-29A and Bs. The later production variant of the J-35B had the PS-03A radar and S-7A2 radar gun sight. The test pilots of the J-35 prototypes could easily handle the aircraft, so SAAB did not plan to design a trainer version of the Draken, but the pilots of the Swedish Air Force disagreed with the company. Therefore, SAAB converted 25 J-35A1s to a two-seat trainer variant by rebuilding the front section of the aircraft. This model, named
So what's the thought process there for initially not wanting to build the training aircraft? Because it's understandable that the plane flies well and it was flown well initially by the test pilots. So are they just thinking that by the time a pilot gets to this plane, they're going to know what they're doing? And then the Swedish Air Force was like, no, we would still rather have training versions of them. Is that what it is?
SK-35C lacked armament. Its nickname was Caesar. The J-35D had a more powerful Rolls-Royce A1 Mark 60 engine than its predecessors, and it was the fastest Draken version. Sweden produced this engine under license and designated as RM6CS. The nickname of the aircraft was David, and it had an increased internal fuel capacity for a longer range. This variant could carry two 500-liter underbelly external drop tanks, while the previous Draken variants could be equipped with only one 530-liter drop tank. Like before, the initial production variant, J-35D1, had no radar, and it was equipped with all Euro gun sights taken from the scrap J-29A and Bs. The J-35D2s had all-weather capability, and they were fitted with the PS-03A radar and S-7A2 radar gun sight. Later, the D1s were upgraded to the D2 standard. So, the Swedish Air Force defined all of them as just J-35D. The S-35E was the reconnaissance variant and had no armament or radar. It carried 5 cameras in the nose and 4 in the wings. The S-35E was one of the first reconnaissance aircraft equipped with an infrared camera in a pod.
That's what I'm curious about. I wonder if they're going to get into. Hang on, let me see.
The J-35F, whose nickname was Philip, had improved electronics and avionics. Different from its predecessors equipped with the AIM-9 Sidewinder, it carried
Okay, so they're not. What so is the only difference with the recon versions of them is that they had the cameras on board? Cuz I'm curious, there's different countries go about recon planes in different ways, and we're kind of at an earlier stage here, but I'm still wondering like what all they did to make it, well, to make it safe basically. I'm wondering what changes they made to make it safe, or if the thought process just was it's fast enough and its speed is going to be its defense. Somebody let me know what the thought process, what changes they made, because I'm curious about that recon version.
the infrared and radar-guided variants of the AIM-4 Falcon missile. For this reason, one of the guns was replaced with missile guidance electronics. Different from the initial J-35F1 variant, the later J-35F2 version had an N-71 infrared search and track sensor under the nose, which gave the aircraft look-down, shoot-down capability. These aircraft were equipped with the PS-011 radar sets in the early 1980s. The latest version of the Draken was J-35J. Its nickname was U-1. They were a modernized variant of the J-35F2s. This model also had two additional AIM-9 Sidewinder pylons under the air intakes and increased internal fuel capacity. The SAAB 35XD was the variant of the Draken produced for Denmark. The Royal Danish Air Force designated the name of the strike, trainer, and reconnaissance variants as F-35, TF-35, and RF-35 respectively. The F-35, which was the heaviest of the Draken variants, was not a fighter but a strike aircraft. It was capable of carrying a mixture of AGM-12 bullpup air-to-ground missiles, electronic countermeasures, and increased internal and external fuel storage. The Danish Drakens had no radar in their noses, and this caused a balance problem. To solve this problem, SAAB 35XDs had metal noses and ballast. The Finnish
Interesting.
Drakens, SAAB 35S, could be equipped with the Russian Wimpel K-13 missiles, whose NATO reporting name is AA-2 Atoll. The SAAB 35E was simply the Austrian variant of J-35D without a missile. The agreements after the Second World War had been restricting the country to have such weaponry. However, during the Slovenian War of Independence, some former Yugoslav aircraft violated the Austrian airspace. So the restriction was lifted and the SAAB 35E began to be equipped with the AIM-9P3 Sidewinder missiles. The J-35 did not have a chance to prove itself in real combat. In the 1990 Firebirds movie, we watched the fight of two Drakens against the US Apaches. Unsurprisingly, Hollywood let one helicopter and one Stinger missile shut down the J-35s. During the 38 years of service in the Swedish Air Force, the Draken reached a total flight time of 766,720 hours.
If you think that's bad, you should watch a Hollywood movie where it's about the British. Oh my gosh, I swear there is this heavy, heavy Brit hatred in Hollywood, especially historical movies. They bash the British. And even if it's not from an American perspective, they just make the British seem like such pricks. So, yes, while it may seem bad and unrealistic, at least that's not at least the Swedes aren't constantly portrayed in the way the Brits are.
Sweden lost 119 of its J-35s in the accidents. The Draken's crash frequency was 15.5 aircraft per 100,000 flight hours in the Swedish service. The corresponding accident rate in Denmark was 6.2 and in Finland 1.4. Denmark, Sweden, Finland, and Austria retired the J-35s in 1992, 19.
Was Sweden flying their planes like animals? What why is their crash rate so much higher than everybody else's? What are they? I know they like that low flight stuff. Is that what it is? Are they is it because they're having their pilots fly these things so fast, so low? Why is their crash rate for these higher than, because it's the same plane basically for the other countries that have it? Why is Sweden specifically, why is their crash rate higher?
1999, 2000, and 2005, respectively. Yet, there are four airworthy Draken. Fortunately, we continue to see these proud Swedish dragons in the sky. Sweden has managed to develop many legendary jet fighters, which have earned this title without a fight. They deserve to become a legend with their unusual but beautiful appearances as well as extraordinary features. And no doubt, the J-35 Draken is one of the most elegant members of this club. Thanks for watching our video. And please don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give us a thumbs up if you liked our video. To be notified of our new videos, please click the bell button. Also, you can now click the join button to support our channel.
Okay, so that was the J-35 Draken. I'm not sure. Yeah, somebody let me know the pronunciation. But really cool aircraft. Did they say the last major country of the group retired it in 2005? That's pretty recent. That's not that long ago. Yeah, really cool. I am curious specifically about the two, the not the stealth, the recon version of the plane and the crash rate. Well, I'm curious why their crash rate was higher, and like substantially higher. You know, considering the implications of what that means, having crash a plane in training. So yeah, let me know. As always, like, comment, subscribe, help me keep building the channel over here, and I'll see you all next time.